The Barbarian Betrayal. Chapter 8. How long before we are able to retake Zuj? Ajum Ganak shook his head as Dayaksh Jiaj Guyazes glowered at him through the screen. 4 more days at least, before we may return to the system, he replied. To attack this new enemy without every ship at our disposal is sheer folly. The beam weapons they mount on their vessels, they are unmatched by anything we have seen before. The Konim leader nodded, though he was clearly unhappy. Are we any closer to learning their identity? He asked. No, Dayaksh, Ganak sighed. The moment the enemy ships entered the orbit of Xuj, all communication ceased. At no time during the battle did they attempt communication, and we have no records of vessels like theirs in our database. We have no idea what they even look like. He shook his head once more. And the Tetrarchy? They know nothing of this race? So they claim, and for my part I believe they speak the truth, the Dayaksh grimaced. By your own admission you state they were savaged by their own ships once the enemy drew near. Somehow, they turned the machine race against them. Were the Tetrarchy aware of any species capable of such things, they would have taken steps long before now to prevent their occurrence. No, I am convinced they were as unprepared for their appearance as we were. I find myself in agreement, Dayaksh. He paused for a moment as his features twisted in disgust. It is difficult to say these words, and yet I must. Perhaps we should consider a formal alliance in order to defeat our common foe. The Dayaksh chuckled. In fact, such a thing has been discussed. While there are many arguments for just such an agreement, in the end both Prime Minister Singh and myself are forced by circumstance to tend to our own matters. Ajum raised an eyebrow. Has this machine insurrection of theirs spread then? It would seem so, Jiaj nodded. Or at the very least they fear it to be true. So then, tell me about these enemies and how we may defeat them. There is little I can tell you, Ganak said. They are hard at work on Zuj building something, but what that may be I do not know. Defenses, the Dayaksh said, rumbled. You may rest assured of that. Most likely, Ajum agreed. But will it be enough to prevent our retaking of the system? We shall soon find out, Jiaj replied, as both Konhim found themselves imagining the battle that was to come. The lone researcher pored over the ancient text, translating the obscure tongue to something more modern. It was painstaking work, requiring more than a little guesswork on his part as he struggled to find parallels to the concepts the tome described. So engrossed was the analyst in his work that he failed to notice the visitor's arrival until she loomed over him. He blinked in surprise at her appearance, before sighing and leaning back in his chair. Hello, Musashi, Tango smiled. Well, as I live and breathe, he chuckled. Talk about your blast from the past. He rose to his feet as the pair embraced, before stepping back and scrutinizing her. My God, how long has it been? Damn near 20 years, she answered, shaking her head. Hard to believe. The pair smiled for a moment, before Musashi pointed her to a chair. Why do I have a feeling you're not here just to reminisce? He asked. Because you're not an idiot, she smirked as they both sat down. I'm here on orders. Helene? He guessed. The one and only, she confirmed. Seems she's a fan of our work. As I recall, you once held a gun to her head, didn't you? Musashi pointed out. Tango waved it aside. Ancient history. But with all that's happening, she figures our skills might come in handy. He sighed at that. I haven't been in the field in years, Tango. Surely there's some young Turks out there, itching for a chance to make their bones. I mean, look at us. If we'd had anything resembling normal lives, we'd be playing with our grandchildren. Don't remind me, she grimaced. And I have no doubt there's other teams being put together. Fujimoto isn't the type to place all her eggs in one basket. Which means she must have something special in mind for us. Wonderful, Musashi snorted. Because retirement was getting so dull. He shook his head. I'm guessing she wants all of the old gang on this? She does, Tango nodded. Greybird is next on my list. Well, he's not going to be happy, Musashi said after a moment. There was a long pause before he asked, And Whisper? Him too, she said. I haven't heard anything about Whisper since, God, since after Saqib, when the war ended, and Marshal Nassat resigned. Guy seemed to just drop off the map. He cocked his head, regarding her. You? I may have picked up a rumor or two, she said somewhat cryptically. I have some leads I'm pursuing. I'll be honest with you, Tango. I'm not in a big hurry to work with that lunatic again. I've come to enjoy not sleeping with one eye open and a gun under my pillow. Waste of time, if you ask me, she chuckled. If Whisper wanted you dead, you'd never see it coming. Well, isn't that a comfort? He grumbled. Don't suppose you could just tell the marshal you didn't find me. Sorry, she shrugged as she rose to her feet. There's a ticket waiting for you on the next transport to the capital. Get your gear and be on it. Musashi sighed and closed the ancient tome he'd been studying. We really must do this more often, Tango. I must once again protest this treatment of my race, Lambda 516 Tensor Pi, the current Ronin minister challenged. We have done nothing wrong, and to be rounded up like criminals. Minister, as I have said from the beginning, this measure is for your protection, Leandra sighed. You've seen the footage from Admiral Matavosian's task force. Can you honestly say you'd want to risk that sort of transformation? For any of your people? You are placing warships above every Ronin world, forbidding entrance or exit, while systematically placing all of my race on other planets in custody, the machine thundered. We are innocent. I do not see you treating the Sorotars or the Ophiptera in this way. The machine stepped forward as the security personnel bristled. Nor do I see you arresting humans. No one has been arrested, the Prime Minister said evenly. Yes, we have placed Ronin individuals in protective custody, but that is a far different thing. Once again, I stress this is for your protection. She was getting really tired of repeating herself, but the Ronin minister wasn't having any of it. There are but 2 ships you are concerned with. 2! Lambda 516 Tensor Pi shouted. Surely all the credits and resources we have poured into our vaunted navy could protect us from that much. And if not, then I must seriously call into question the leadership which has left us so vulnerable. I can assure you, as the populace begins to feel the effects your martial law places us under, I will have all the support I will need to see you removed. Do you think I've survived this long as Prime Minister because of my good looks and charm? Leandra shot back as her patience suddenly came to an end. You want to go there? Then be my guest. She leaned forward, giving as God as she got. I've broken ministers before. I've sent them to prison for treason. So do not test me, Minister, because you will not like how it ends. Leandra rose to her feet. I've tried to be reasonable, but I am telling you now that, say, this is how it is, how it has to be. I suggest you accept that. She glanced over to the head of her security detail. We're done here. The officer nodded, stepping forward. Minister, if you will step this way. The officer was perfectly polite with his request, but the 4 behind him with drawn weapons sent a message that was impossible to ignore. For a moment, Lambda 516 Tensor Pi looked as if it would defy her request, but then finally spun on its metallic heel and stormed out of the chamber as Leandra slumped back into her chair. It had barely been a week since she'd made her announcement, and the mood of the population was starting to get troublesome. God help them all if the quarantine failed. The Barbarian Betrayal. Chapter 9. The secretary listened for a moment to her earpiece, and then smiled. The chairman will see you now, she informed Tango, ushering her through the glass doors to the office beyond, before closing them behind her. The lanky blonde did a slow turn, taking it all in. Nice place you got here, she chuckled, as she crossed over to the man waiting to greet her. You've done pretty well for yourself. Graybird reached out and took her hand. It's good to see you, he grinned, waving her over to an informal seating area as the secretary returned with a cart, wheeling it over beside his chair before discreetly departing once more. Coffee? Tea? Or if you'd like, I'm pretty sure somewhere in the Tetrarchy the sun's over the yardarm, he smirked as he lifted up an expensive-looking bottle. You know me well, Graybird, Tango chuckled as he cracked open the bottle and began to pour. Do I want to know what that is? Does it matter? They shared a laugh as he poured for them both, handing over a glass as he took his seat. 2 old friends, he toasted, raising his glass. Tango did likewise before taking a sip. Good stuff, she sighed in content before setting down her glass. Just how in the hell did you manage to build all this? She asked. Simple. I saw an opportunity and I took it, he grinned. After the war, not to mention the coup, there were plenty of the old triumvirate types that started thinking us crazy humans weren't just being paranoid after all. I started selling security upgrades to their systems, offered top-of-the-line service and tech support, and charged them every credit the market would bear. He spread his arms wide, indicating his plush office. And the rest, as they say, is history. And added a backdoor to each and every one of those systems, am I right? She smirked. Greybird's expression was innocence personified. I only use backdoors for security upgrades and support, he explained, though there was a twinkle in his eye that was hard to miss. Tango laughed as she took another sip of her drink. Look, you've probably guessed why I'm here, she said at last as she came to the point. Yeah, I have, he admitted, before finally shrugging. Can I be honest with you? You'd better, she warned, though she smiled as she said it. He nodded, taking a long sip from his glass before finally leaning forward and looking her in the eyes. Tango, I'm bored. It was a real challenge, building this company from the ground up. But these days, it pretty much runs itself. Last week, I snuck out of the building to play hooky for a few hours. And no one noticed. He sighed as he shook his head. Do you have any idea how depressing that is? As a matter of fact, I think I do, she nodded. Why do you think I ended up with Nasat? You know, I'd always wondered about that, Greybird said after a moment. You were the last person in the world I would have pictured playing nursemaid. That's not exactly how I'd describe it, though you're not all that far off. You remember how it all went down at the end? His wife and Sergeant Lin dying, him blaming himself. The guy was a mess. I always understood why he walked away from it all. And with the war over, Tango shrugged. Greybird, I'm a killer. I'm good at it. But I finally came to a point where I didn't want to be defined by that. Nasat, the guy just wanted to be left alone. I protected his privacy, looked out for his kids, and in return, for the first time in a very long time, he gave me a home. She smiled wistfully as she stared into her glass. He needed me, Greybird, and I liked the idea of being needed. Greybird nodded and smiled. I understand. So, would I be correct in assuming you came here with a mission in mind? Yes and no, she explained. Yes, I'm here to recruit you, at the Field Marshal's orders, but I don't know what the job is yet. The hacker frowned for a moment. Didn't you jam a gun into her ear once? He asked. Tango rolled her eyes. Why does everyone keep bringing that up? She groaned. General Nasat, welcome to Thayteen, the Ophipteran officer greeted him. I am Zimvwa, commander of the battlecruiser Chiron. You honor us with your presence, sir. Nasat inclined his head and somehow managed to stifle the impulse of handing off his jacket to Tango. It wasn't easy, unlearning the habits of 20 years overnight, and if the situation did not change soon, he would be forced to find a replacement, though he couldn't imagine anyone stepping into the role as well as she had. It felt as if his arm had been amputated. Thank you, Commander, he replied, though I hope you will take no offense when I say this is one honor I wish I could have avoided. Zimvwa froze, unsure how to respond, until Nasat finally relented, waving his own comment aside. Please forgive my irascibility, Commander. Returning to active duty was not something I had planned on. What then is the status of the blockade? The Ophipteran looked unhappy. Not good, sir. At the moment, other than Chiron itself, we have only a handful of patrol boats and a few aging comets. I have sent repeated requests to the Admiralty for more ships, but as of yet they have not responded. I would not hold your breath awaiting those ships, Commander, Nasat sighed. Given the number of worlds we are tasked to protect, the fleet is stretched far thinner than anyone would like, which means we will be forced to come up with ways to perform our mission based solely on what we have. To his credit, Zimvwa did not appear surprised by this bit of unwelcome news. In that case, sir, I would be most curious to hear your thoughts. Nasat sighed and punched up a display of the planet. If we are to protect this world, our mission is twofold. First, we must prevent the arrival of the rogue vessels. With only one warship at our disposal, early detection is paramount. Zemvoir's wings fluttered as he viewed the holographic display. We can launch our inventory of satellites and probes to give us better coverage of the planet, he mused. Once they have been integrated into the network, it should give us adequate warning of any incoming vessels. Chiron could then move to intercept. He touched the controls as new specks of light appeared in the display, moving to near equidistant locations over Thetan, before looking back up to the Sorator. You said there were two aspects to the mission, sir? I did, Nasat answered, as his features grew worn and haggard. Should we fail in preventing the rogue vessels from making their run to the planet, we must then assume that not only has the quarantine been breached, but the infection is spreading through the population like wildfire. He looked up, his eyes meeting those of his Ophipteran counterpart. May I assume you have seen the footage from Matavosian's task force? I have, sir, Zemvoir nodded. It makes for disturbing viewing. That it does, and were our situation 1 gram less urgent than it is, you would be forced to do without my august presence. Nasat managed a wan smile, though perhaps that would be an advantage in the long run. The commander gave him a carefully scripted smile, and he sighed as he realized he was being humored. Commander, should the quarantine be breached, he continued, giving up on his feeble experiment at levity, the matter of early detection becomes even more important, for any attempt of a vessel to leave the planet at that point must be prevented, by any means necessary. The Ophipteran looked away for a moment before nodding. Yes, sir. May we at least seek to communicate with any vessels before being forced to use more drastic measures? Nasat recognized just how anguished Zemvoir was by their orders. It was something he understood all too well. In fact, I would insist on it, Commander, he replied. Opening fire should only be taken as a final measure, when all other options have been extinguished. That being said, we must decide on a point for both incoming and outgoing vessels, where no further warnings will be given, and we must be resolute in our execution of that directive. He winced at his poor choice of words. Yes, sir, Zemvoir agreed, ignoring the faux pas. General, the chief administrator of Thetan has made repeated demands to speak to someone in authority, someone more highly placed than myself, I'm afraid. I would not normally seek to shirk my duties, however. It is all right, Nasat said. I will speak to the administrator and hopefully allay any concerns. I suspected something like this was the reason the field marshal sent me here. He was not looking forward to that conversation. What he suspected would be the first of many. With any luck, the vessels will soon be recaptured, and we will be able to put this entire matter behind us, Nasat continued with some degree of hope. Until then, however, he sighed and looked back at the display. Duty demands we remain vigilant.